Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Dr. Mark Taylor. He is the Chief Technical Officer for U.S. Special Operations Command. Dr. Taylor, good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get to the multi-cloud hybrid environment that SOCOM has been working on for quite some time now. Where do you stand with it? What does it look like? And what are your immediate plans for it for the next year or so? Let's start there.
Sure. So, like many different groups within Department of Defense, especially in the U.S. government, the reality of having just one vendor is just not very realistic anymore. Whether that be for the fact that many different groups within different organizations had started at different points in time and have different levels of maturity. So that being the steady state when I came here about 18 months ago, there were multiple different groups within SOCOM that had already begun their cloud journey. So, there's Azure from Microsoft, there's AWS from Amazon, and there's others that we're looking into. We're in discussions with Google, as well as Oracle. And so what we did basically once I got here was made the firm decision to try to provide an enterprise offering, or at least corral them to some degree so that we could offer the different types of clouds at maybe different impact levels, so that different groups, whether they be TSOCs or components, could consume through or with us versus have sanctioned shadow IT. So where that is now is we've got, class and non-class, and that's kind of where I'll leave it. Impact levels or different versions of the cloud, which are air-gapped, that we have. We've got ATOs, so a lot of them are in production ready, and we're now at the levels of working with the different customers to try to provide them an onboarding, and the reality is, in terms of how it's being used or how folks are getting along, like any group, or if you have a family, there's different groups or different levels of maturity. So some folks are quite mature in their journey to the cloud, getting after things every day, and then there's other folks that are just looking for the training wheels. And so we're working more heavily with the folks looking for the training wheels, and then we're trying to support those folks that are already very mature in their journey.
And would it be safe to say, or accurate to say, that given that military requirements for cloud computing tend to be more rigorous in terms of safety, security, secrecy than maybe the general government, is SOCOM kind of at the far edge of what DoD demands in terms of security, just given the nature of special forces and the shroud that tends to envelop it?
Right. I would say that obviously the federal government, specifically the Department of Defense, has to adhere to more stringent requirements than obviously a commercial entity would. So that's the reason why, if you look at the FedRAMP options of the cloud, they have impact levels, right? So impact level 2 would be the dirty internet or regular internet that we use at home. Then there's impact level 4, which is now you're starting to get into government government provided cloud offerings. And then there's impact level 5, which is now something that's specifically tailored and air gapped within the different cloud providers. Also provides US only citizens that would work on it in the background, and is capable of providing NIPRNet capabilities. But then the cloud providers have also offered secret level clouds, and they're working on other things, because the reality is, agencies are going to take advantage of the capabilities that are out there, and the federal government's making investments within the companies to try to gain an access to this. So we definitely follow the FedRAMP high, and the standards that are there. And then for things that are beyond that, then we utilize things like ICDs, or the former DCIDs. So things that are more along, I guess, the Intel framework, and most of these can all be found on the internet. So definitely more stringent requirements, but we take advantage of everything that's there. So whether it be traditional comms to cloud, uh, you know, SATCOM, RF, 5G, a circuit, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. We're going to use pretty much any form of communication that you can imagine to do what it is that we need to do, or to coordinate with folks. Because at the end of the day, it's all about utilizing the tools that are available to you to get access to the thing, the widget, the service, the experience, the data that you need.
And let's talk about total cost of ownership that you're facing. How do you balance that? Because no organization has unlimited money. And so you've still got some on-premise compute, you've got the cloud instances that are expanding. How do you gauge total cost of ownership, and how does that figure into your planning?
Right. So I think that that's a very good question. I think it's a penetrating question. I think it's one that needs to be explored more across not just SOCOM, DoD, and but the government at large. And what I mean is, in the government, as I'm sure you've probably heard or you may have experienced, if you have a budget of $100 and next year, because you were really working very stringent, very hard, being a good custodian of taxpayer dollars, you were able to meet your mission, but at $90. Well, what you get for your amazing work and teamwork and team building and ability to manage money well and save the taxpayer is, now that tells the bean counters that, oh well, you can get by with 90, so the following year you will only get $90
Or
because you just
85.
set your new normal, or 85. So you've just set your new normal, right? So instead of a high watermark, you're now setting a low watermark for yourself. Um, so so understand that that is a thing. So if your budget is $100, then you need to try to make sure that you spend $100. So instead of looking for ways to necessarily cut costs to make something cheaper, I think a better approach is to look at cost avoidance, right? So how can I not spend more money? So how can I not spend $101? How can I not spend $105? How can I make sure I spend $100? And then, if, because I'm a good, have a fiduciary responsibility as a good custodian of taxpayer dollars, I should naturally, and my team of leaders should be naturally working to try to figure out, how can I actually operate at $90? Well, then what do I do with that other 10? Well, now that's money. And again, this is Mark Taylor's perspective. This is not a contracting officer's perspective. This is not some person who actually obligates the government's money. I'm merely telling you my observation. You look at ways to, how can I use that money for now things that I didn't normally have in my plan, right? So I can maybe repurpose this money, this $10 out of the 100 that I didn't have for things today. So I was able to rob Peter to pay Paul. I was able to squeeze the balloon, but now I have this $10 that I can now get after some specific effort in FY23 that I might have palmed for in FY25. So instead of coming up with a UFER or trying to figure out how to ask for more money to get by for those next 2 years, now I can maybe use this $10 that I figured out how to acquire out of my $100, and now use that $10 for something else. I'm sure that I've probably broken some kind of crazy regulatory rule, but I'm saying that's kind of Mark Taylor's approach to it, to try to make sure that I am being a good custodian and providing a good faith effort to do the right thing for the right reason with the taxpayer dollars that have been provided to me, so that I can provide a service and a mission capability to the command, but also to America at large. Um, so so understand that that's the baseline thought process. Now, how does that actually become applicable to what we're trying to do? Well, we try to get economy of scale. So some of the things that I've noticed across the command, whether it be, Marine Special Operations is doing this and Army Special Operations is doing that, um, if I notice that they're both paying for the same kind of service, maybe we try to figure out how do we pay for that at the enterprise level and maybe get a discount, maybe get a 2-for-1 or something. So there's nothing wrong with trying to gain economies of scale, especially to what's offered. But we try to make sure that we're not paying for the same widget twice if we don't have to, especially when we could pay for it once and help 2 or more groups. So that's essentially how we would approach that. So I hope that answers your question. Um, and then just to take one thing back to your earlier question about, the stringent security requirements that we go through in Special Operations Command relative to a regular user. Well, we use a push to talk mic. So after every single time that I answer you with my hand, I have to depress on this button so that when I'm done speaking, there will be no more electronic communication from my voice to you, because we are SOCOM, we're special, and we're here to help.
Right, and that gets to the idea of the mission itself, and when you talk about budgeting and trying to make a dollar stretch further rather than to shrink the dollars expended so that you can get more functionality, somehow that relates back to the mission. And so I wanted to ask you, what are some of the unique challenges of special forces in the cloud? And I'm guessing one of them is the fact that in the actual operation of special forces, when they are doing the nation's work, they are often in those environments deprived of connectivity to a cloud, contested. You mentioned smoke signals and pigeons, and sometimes you can't reach back to the cloud at the front end of special operations with high bandwidth satellite or whatever communications, or maybe satellite. So, what are some of the unique demands of special forces on cloud computing?
Sure. So as it is today, when we prosecute war or do not war, um, we're normally doing those not in Malibu or Times Square or someplace nice. We're normally
Tampa,
doing it
downtown.
in right. We're normally doing it in some austere part of the world that's not necessarily hospitable. Usually, they're not happy that we're there, or they tolerate us while we are. And so, again, usually the places that we would do our missions are also not the best infrastructures, right? Like a desert or some crazy jungle, places that don't natively have good connectivity. So the key is to try to figure out what services you need and then take those services with you. And so we're all about practicality. For example, you see that I'm sharing an office with the Chief Engineer, Special Operations Command, CW5 Ryland Knight, and he's working right now, and he just waved at at real work for the taxpayer. Um, so how do you take the cloud with you? Well, there are a number of ways to do that. A lot of the services that we utilize that we might build in the cloud, if it's especially if it's IaaS or some kind of PaaS service, is we look at how do we gain the efficiencies of that technology and make it portable. Um, so everyone's heard of probably by this time over the last 20 years about virtual machines, of a VM. How do I trick a part of the computer into thinking that it's its own computer? Another step beyond that is containerization. How do I take a container and basically containerize an application or a system or an experience, right? How do I containerize X amount of data with Y amount of compute and Z amount of front end or IO capability, and make that portable so that I can put it on a server, on a laptop, on a phone, in the cloud. I can make that experience portable. So, I think that using technologies like this help us get after it. In some places in corporate America, that sounds like old hat. In some of the bowels of the government, that might seem like witchcraft. But those are some of the things that we would look at: is how do we take this experience that we might currently be utilizing for the sake of efficiency, of speed, of scale, of lower cost, and put all this hard question into the cloud, and it will gonkulate an answer, and I get my answer, and based off of the answer I make a decision on if I'm going to do A or I'm going to do B. Well, now imagine taking that same capability. Do I need it to be as powerful as the mighty gonkulator, or can I have the mini gonculator, right? And just how do I take that, make it as an economy of scale, and now put it into a container and put it on a smaller platform, such as a smaller device that I can take with me. And now I have that capability with me wherever I go. And so again, that should not be rocket science to anybody in modern day time, but essentially that those are some of the things that we look at. Now, why do we do that? Because we have the challenges of, if I have to, have a connection all the way back to the mothership, I might not get there, or it might be a bad experience, or I might not be able to get there at all. I might never be able to connect, or never have that hope. So these are some of the things that we have really invested in, continue to invest in. We continue to work with our cloud service providers to look at ways to make that easy. So if there's service X that I like from cloud provider Y, that I could then take it as container Z and move forward with my time. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there might be people that call it witchcraft. Some people call it edge computing in a disconnected environment. And then, as to follow up on that, then given the learnings that could happen with the junior level, if you will, calculating engine that is disconnected, but nevertheless useful in the field, this container with all the resources for that instance, then you can always resynchronize afterwards when there is connectivity, and whatever new learnings or new data might have been garnered in that operation then can be uploaded to strengthen your algorithms for the next time.
Yeah, I mean that's it in a nutshell. And a great part about just the whole edge computing, people think that you go to the cloud and like you stay there and that's it and it's a done deal. And just the reality is we're, multi-cloud for choice, right? I don't Very few places would have the money to put the app in Azure, AWS, and Google all at the same time. I'm sure that, if there was a widget or, system or service that is so mission critical to us, national security, whatever, yeah, you could pay to do that. It's not a technical problem at all. It's a financial cost, political, whatever, the constraint may be. Reason, the reality, normally you would put something in cloud X and it normally stays there, and you would probably only move it if there was a compelling need, some significant emotional event. But outside of that, you normally keep things uh, where they are. Now, people think that when you come in to a SOCOM or a DoD, that there's a new sheriff in town, we're trying to get things to the cloud, we're going to try to extract more value out of it, so that it's not this science project, right? It's actually a tool that's providing value on a daily basis. Well, they think that you're going to be cloud and cloud only. Well, if you're not serious about going to the cloud, if you're not serious about providing and extracting value from the cloud services that you've invested in, um, then you're never going to get there. Because if you keep saying we're hybrid, which we are, well, some people are going to hear, well, that means I'm on-prem. Well, yes, you're on-prem and you're in the cloud. So by being a cloud first, that means you're going to the cloud, but as you buy new on-prem gear, you need to make sure that you are buying on-prem gear that can look and feel just like your cloud experience, right? So that's the critical difference. So that as we do edge computing, I've often said we got to go to the cloud so we can go back on-prem. I have to be serious and understand how to do everything in a cloud. I have to understand DevOps, DevSecOps is the way to do things, so that when I have newer on-prem purpose-built gear, it the experience is the same. That way I have one skill set. I don't have to have a bunch of server huggers and a bunch of cloud bubbas. I can have one operating force that knows how to work. And the only way that they would know that the experience is being served on-prem is if maybe they looked at the login or they looked at the name of what they connected to. But the user in consuming a resource or a service or having an experience should should not even know, should not care. They should just be able to connect and get access to service.
All right. That makes a lot of sense, actually. And I think it ties into what we spoke about a few minutes ago, and that is in the environments where there is no connectivity, that experience is as if people were connected. And so therefore the hybrid is really a necessary condition and not just something as a talking point. And I guess this is about cybersecurity because there are different cybersecurity regimes needed for being online, being in the cloud, and going back and forth, and at the edge when you're maybe limited connectivity and so forth. So, talk about your cybersecurity requirements and how you meet them.
Sure. So cybersecurity, is it's uniform from the sense that there's a uniform. Everybody's job is cybersecurity. Everybody is a cyber person, and hopefully one day everyone will be a cyber expert. It just needs to be part of who you are and what you do. Um, See something, say something. Outside of that, there are multiple levels, multiple different teams, which I won't get into here, that are providing Overwatch at different levels. So security is baked into everything, whether it be the application, the container, the network, the OS. Every single thing, there's security. There's zero trust in terms of how am I securing my identities, how am I securing my connections based on ICAM, that gets me to zero trust. Then it gets into a data centric model, in which case now I have to have labeling and tagging of all of my data so that I can match the right role of the right ICAM model to that tag so that they have the permissions based off of zero trust. So cyber security can become a huge thing in terms of making sure that cybersecurity is a part of every aspect of what it is that we do. There are multiple teams that provide Overwatch at different levels. We follow all of the guidelines of all of the stipulations relative to the impact level, whether it be unclassified, classified, higher levels of classification. Um, then there are local rules that we follow. And that's the thing. There's always some government mandate from some government organization. And then you get to the agency, we'll say DHS. There's DHS level security that you must follow. Then let's say you go down to CBP. Their CBP has their things. So you take that and extrapolate that to DoD. So there's always some other level. I'm trying to think about what I can really talk about that would be open, but essentially it's following all of the published guidelines that you would find, on the internet, that you would think of, and then after that it becomes a matter of best practice also by the vendor, and then there's guidance provided by other intelligence agencies, like make sure that you don't do this or you do that. Okay, again, all of that gets added to now the local SOP, standard operating procedure, so we would do these things. And then you have accreditation. So you have to get an authorization to operate. So before you actually connect or you do anything, you would have what it is that you're trying to do, reviewed, the process, and then once you meet all of those, you would document it, and then you would have an Overwatch that would look at it from that point forward. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess you have strong passwords and all that kind of good stuff too, fair to say.
True.
All right. On that note, we're going to take a short break. My guest today is Dr. Mark Taylor. He is the Chief Technical Officer for U.S. Special Operations Command. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back soon. You're listening to the Federal News Network, DoD Cloud Exchange. I'm Tom Temin.